Howdy bubs and welcome back. Today we'll be jumping into GameMaker for our first time and building up Pong. We need to familiarize ourselves with GameMaker, and so starting off with a new project, conveniently you can just select New, Game. We'll be making a blank game and we'll call it something appropriate. In this context, Pong. Seems simple enough. Let's go. Alright, now that I've jumped in here, this is our workspace. The left is our inspector. Whatever we click on, the inspector will give us the details. On the right side is our asset browser. The asset browser is very important. All of our game assets will appear over here and we will be interacting with this regularly. Then at the bottom we have all of our messages. The most important ones we'll deal with is our compiler errors and any outputs that we might receive, but primarily in your case it'll be compiler errors. Anytime anything breaks, it'll pop up down here. Onto our workspace, this is where we actually will be creating and writing all of our code. I'm going to right click on the objects folder and I'm going to create a new object. This is going to be obj underscore, and this will be just player. I'm going to treat this as a parent object for our two players, player 1 and player 2. This is just to make it simpler for both players to just share a little bit of code and the collisions. In the parent for the player, obj parent player parent, I'm going to add a create event. In my create event, initial value. In my create event, I'm going to just set our movement speed to be equal to 10. So I want my players to move 10 pixels per step. I'm just going to set that there. They'll both end up using it. What will differ is the up and down movements for each object. I'm going to right click on the next object, also call it obj. We want to make sure these are clear, and by setting the prefix of obj, it clarifies that this is the object, so there's no confusion. This is obj player 1, and I'm going to add a key down event. So whenever I press down on a key and hold it down, it will repeat this action. So whenever I press the key down for the up arrow key, these four are arrow keys, I want to move up. And so I'm going to modify my current Y value, set it equal to the current Y value minus 5. Actually, minus movement speed. Right now, our object actually doesn't know what movement speed is. I need to make sure to connect this to the parent object, obj player parent. Now we see here it inherits the create event. So the create event specifies movement speed is 10. Down here, this captures that, and so it will decrease its current position by 10 pixels, and this will get us to move up on the canvas. Do note on computers, the origin point for the y-axis is in the top left corner, so positive y moves downwards rather than upwards, which is what you're used to, which is why we subtract to move up on the canvas. I'm going to create another event, another key down event for the down arrow key, and this will have us move down. I will have y is equal to y plus our movement speed. Now that we have both up and downward movement as well as the initial movement speed declared, I'm going to go ahead and create player 2. As a shortcut, since we're going to actually copy everything except just change what key it is, I'm going to right click on my player 1 object and I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to rename this to be player 2. Double click to open player 2. We see it inherits everything. We've got the same key down and key up events. I want to modify these. I'm going to right click on this and I'm going to change this event. I'm going to change this event to be a key down event, and I want to use the W and S keys. So I'm going to switch it to be letters, W, and then for moving down, change event to key down for the letter S. So now I have the up and down movement. We have our three objects. One is just a parent, serves as a template. The other two are the actual player objects we'll be using, player 1 and player 2. But right now, our objects have no sprite attached to them. There's nothing that allows us to see that they exist into our game. So let's go over to the sprites folder. If you right click on the sprites folder, you can go to create and create a brand new sprite. Again, following our naming conventions, I will do SPR underscore, and this will be player 1. They have the same matching name. The only difference is their prefix. We have OBJ or we have SPR. That lets me know that this is a sprite. By default, your origin point is in the top left and your size is 64 by 64. I generally will usually have my origin points moved to middle center or bottom middle, bottom center. Depends on the situation. In our case today, I'm going to keep it at middle center. Over for the size, I'm going to modify this for our player. You can change this however you want based off of what you want your player sprite to look like. I know some of you are drawing individual characters. Some of you are just keeping it simple as a box. I'm going to keep it as just a box. But if you draw something or import anything, you want to scale it up and down so you keep the same image overall appearance. You just make it bigger or smaller. You can do this, scale image. If you want to change the size of the entire canvas and give you more space or remove space that you're not working with, you can do resize canvas. I'm going to make this be taller than it is wide, so I'm going to have this 128. I'm going to hit apply, and now it's wider. Now to actually draw inside here, I'm going to do edit image. In here you have tons of tools, full color palette, play around and figure out how all of this works, ask me in class and I will provide assistance. For my convenience, I'm simply going to make a white box with the number 1 on it. Wonderful. Let me make that slightly bigger. Let's do 25. There, masterpiece, work of art. I'm then going to create another sprite. In my case, I'm simply going to duplicate since it's going to be the same box. Make this size player 2. Jump over to player 2, edit this. I'm going to change the color. I'm going to make player 2 be the yellow. And I'm going to erase this and do a giant number 2. There we go. I now have player 1, player 2. They've both been created. They're both boxes. I am done here. If I go over to our objects, I can then select over here and attach the sprites to my players. So object player 1 will receive sprite player 1. Object player 2 will receive sprite player 2. Now that they both exist and can be seen, I can go over into the rooms folder, double left click on room 1, and now this is the game space. This is where all of our activities will take place. And I'm going to place player 1 over on the left side with one box open, player 2 on the right side with one box open. And there we go. We now have our players. I can hit the play button. The first time it builds the game, it takes slightly longer, but now we're ready to go. If I press W, my player 2 moves. If I press up arrow key, my player 1 moves. And there we go. We have our player movement already complete for Pong. But we have to add, of course, the most important element, the ball that bounces between them. So we're going to create another object. I'm going to right click, create object, and this will be obj underscore ball. With our ball object, we can create a couple of events to work with. First off, our create event, add, create, and in here we're just going to begin moving. So our horizontal speed, this is our movement towards the left or right in the x-axis. I'm going to have it choose randomly to either move 10 pixels to the left per frame or 10 pixels to the right per step specifically. Now that we have our horizontal speed set out, let's go ahead and do our step event. Every step, the program will run this code, and in this case, all I'm trying to check to see is if I have bounced off the top or the bottom of the room. So bounce off top, bottom. So if the bounding box for the bottom of our sprite has gone past the room height, or if the bounding box for the top has gone past the top of our room, so 0, then I want my vertical speed to be the opposite of my current vertical speed. I'm making it negative. Or if it was negative, it now becomes positive. This just tells it whether it's moving up or down. Again, vertical deals with the movement in the up and down directions or the y-axis. So now we can move left and right and we can bounce off the top and the bottom, but we need to bounce off of the player as well. So I'm going to add a collision event, but I don't have to specify player 1 or player 2. I can reference their parent object. By referencing the parent object, it'll also reference all of the children of that object. This means that I can just specify once rather than having to specify twice what to do whenever we collide. So in the case we have a collision with the parent object, we then bounce off player, and our horizontal speed is going to be the negative of our horizontal speed, so it changes directions. And to make sure the game kind of speeds up a bit, I'm going to increase the speed by 5%. Then to just add a little bit of randomness, I'm going to set the vertical speed to be equal to a random range between negative 10 and positive 10. So anything in between negative 10 or positive 10. The difference between a choose and a random range is that choose will either be negative 10 or positive 10. That's it. No different. Nothing in between. Only negative 10 or positive 10. Random range will be between these two values. And so you can have a negative 9, a negative 1, a 3, a 0 even. This determines the vertical speed of the ball after it bounces off a player. And finally, what happens once we go past the left or right side? In our case, we need to have another event for outside the room. If the ball passes outside of the room, we then need to restart room. So room underscore restart, open close parentheses. We're going to add a little bit more to this in a bit, but for the time being, this is all that we're going to deal with. Before I create the sprite, right click on the sprites folder, create sprite, spr underscore ball. I'm going to keep this at this size, edit image. I'm going to just keep it as a box. This can be a red box. There we go. Now I'm going to go to my room. Oh, sorry, like that. Remember to set the origin, middle, center. Attach it to our object. Then I can go into my room. I'm going to place this. This looks about center. Now I can hit play and we can see if this works. Or bounces, and it looks like it's good. It restarted. Everything appears to be lining up correctly. And yeah, it looks like we've got a functional game of Pong. So there you go. But how do I know what the score is? How do I know who's won? How do I know when I have even won? We need to add in a little bit more before we can call this game complete. I'm going to create one more object, and this will be our obj score. Right click, create object, and this will be obj underscore score. This will keep track of everything relevant to the score of the game and determine when we need to stop the game. I'm going to add an event, our create event, and in the create event, I'm going to set score to 0. I'm going to have points player 1 is equal to 0, points player 2 is equal to 0. We have that now set. I want to have then we want to make sure we draw this on the canvas. So add event, draw, and draw GUI. This will draw onto the graphical user interface, so regardless of where you are in the room. In our case, it actually wouldn't change anything between drawing in the room versus drawing in the GUI, but I'd normally want to keep my scores as a GUI, so we're going to do that here. So in our draw GUI, we're going to address drawing the scores. So over here, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to draw text, and it's going to be at position 50, 50. So that's the top left. Actually, no, I'm going to add a little bit more space. 60 pixels in, 50 pixels down. And I want it to say P1 for player 1 has a score of, and then points underscore player 1. So this will draw just player 1's points, and by default it should be 0. Draw underscore text, display, get GUI, in this case the width. I'm going to get the rightmost side of my screen, and then I'm going to subtract 60 pixels. It's going to be 50 pixels down, and just to make sure it's easy to see, P2 colon space close quotation marks plus string casting on the points for player 2. So now it should at least draw just some text on the screen. Let's go ahead and test to make sure this works. Go into room 1. I'm going to go ahead and drag my score into here. It has no sprite. It does not need a sprite. It draws stuff for us to look at. I'm going to hit play, and it should just show up at the top, P1 and P2. We don't have any mechanic to keep track of the score just yet. And also, I'm not happy with the font and how it looks, so we're going to have to mess around a little bit more to improve this. So let's first address the looks of it. I'm going to go ahead and go into the fonts folder, and I'm going to create a brand new font. I'm going to call this font underscore score. Here I'm going to specify, you can have a look through all of these different options to see which of these you find the most interesting, looks the best. I'm just going to scroll through and randomly pick. There we go. This one could be better. There. I picked this one. I'm going to set this to be size 30 font. All right. I'm good there. Satisfied. Now over in our score object, I'm going to specify in the create event, draw set font. I'm going to specify that this will use the font underscore score. And then I'm going to go ahead and use, let me rename this. FNT is the standard. There we go, FNT. If you rename it here, it corrects it over here, so that's a convenient thing. Draw set font using the score font, and then as we saw, it wasn't perfectly centered. It uses by default the left alignment. I'm going to swap this to be center align. So draw set horizontal align to be font center. It's font alignment and then specifically the center alignment. Now whenever I run it, our font is much larger, looks much cleaner, and it is center aligned, so it looks much nicer overall. I want to give it a little bit more space here just because we do have the potential to get up to 10 points or 2-digit numbers. So I'm going to go in and on the draw GUI, change this to be 70 and -70. Take a look, and there we go. This looks much better. One of the beauties of working in GameMaker and just programming the games out is that you can just change a couple of numbers and just run the game and see if it looks good. If you're satisfied with it, then you're good to go. If you're not, well, you can keep playing around with those numbers. So now we have the scores. It's better font. I'm happy, but the scores aren't going up. We need to fix that. That code is captured not in our score, but instead with the ball. Whenever the ball goes outside the room, we need to figure out which side it went out of. And so here, if the bounding box on the right side of our ball has gone past our obj underscore player, which side is the player? Let me check. Player 1 is on the left side. So if our right side of the ball has gone past player 2, so it's moving to the right, B box left, the left side of them, then I want to make sure obj underscore score dot points for player 1 increases by 1. If we've gone outside the room and it's not because we went off the right side of the player 2, well, we can just do the else clause to capture all other conditions and specify to increase obj score for points player 2 by 1. So if we didn't go off the right side, well, then we went off the left side. There's only 2 options, and so increase the corresponding player score by 1. Let's see here. It'll bounce off there. Well, we're running into an issue, because what does our game currently do? It restarts the room. Everything gets reset back to 0. To fix this problem, I need to make sure that our score is persistent. That means anytime that the rooms are changed or restarted, the object score does not get modified. It does not rerun its grade event. It instead still stays there, remembering what the score was before the restart. Now here it'll bounce, and our score has gone up correspondingly. And there we go. And because we have the room restart, even if the components are moved back and forth, in the case that the restart occurs, they get recentered. And there we go. Our score is now going up on both correct sides. Everything's good. But when does our game end? Well, we can set some upper limit. I'm just going to set it to be 10. We can jump back over into our code and go ahead and look at the score. And in the draw GUI, we can just add a little check near the bottom. If our points for player 1 are greater than or equal to 10, they've gotten to at least 10 points, or the points for player 2 have gone past greater than or equal to 10, then I'm going to draw text, and I'm just going to draw this in the center of our screen. Display underscore get GUI width divide by 2. So I want the center of the screen in the X direction, and display underscore get GUI width, no, height on this one, divide by 2, and I want to say game over, hit space to restart. The \n forces this to a new line, so the way it'll actually look, it'll have game over on the line right below it, hit spacebar to restart. Well, I need to actually add the code for that, so add, and I'm going to put in a key pressed event, so it only triggers once, space, and then this will be restart game. Game underscore restart, open close parentheses. Now when I hit run, it goes back and forth. I'm going to make sure player 1 gets to my 10 points. Once it reaches there, the player will then see the prompt telling them that the game is over and to hit spacebar to restart, and the players are able to easily just see which player has clearly won. Now technically the spacebar is always operational, so you can hit the spacebar at any point and it'll restart, but they don't know that until this prompt comes up. And so you can keep playing if you want to, but it is now officially over. One player has won. I hit spacebar and we're back to here, and I can hit spacebar again to show that the restart does actually happen, and we can see it actually going back and forth between the different chooses. But that's Pong. You have now created your first very simple game. Go ahead and work through this. If you have any questions, need any assistance, just let me know in class. Otherwise, that's all I have for y'all. Everyone, have a good one. I just wanted to say thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Shout out to my bad bubs, my top 5, my day ones. Y'all have always been there for me. Next up, my baby bubs, the next 5. I always love y'all's support. And finally, for everyone else, any little bit helps. Thank you to all my basic bubs for supporting me along my journey. If you want to continue receiving notifications, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell button.